All right, thanks for joining us this week. Today we're going to be previewing South Carolina's opponent for the weekend, Texas A&M. Jack, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Karenna. Happy Halloween, by the way, as we're recording this on Thursday. And yeah, I hope you're doing well as well. I'm doing great. And everything good on your end?
Yeah, going great. I'm really excited for this weekend. I think we have some really interesting matchups. So I'm hyped for Saturday. I don't even know if I'm excited for Halloween, but I'm definitely excited for football this weekend.
Halloween at this age, because we're both in our 20s, like Halloween is cool, but it's not what it used to be when you go
Mm-hmm.
out trick or treating and stuff. Like now, it's like you go to the bars, you get sloshed, have a good time, and dress up. But yeah, but Saturday's gonna be crazy. I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think the energy at the stadium is gonna be really electric. Night game, SEC game, a lot on the line for both teams. I'm really excited about this game, as I know you are, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. All right, let's just get right into it. A&M just had a QB change. What do you think Marcel Reed is going to bring to this matchup?
Yeah, and I think the thing we have to keep in mind with this is we presume Marcel Reed's going to be the starter for Texas A&M in this game, although head coach Mike Elko has made it clear he's not going to announce who his starter will truly be until we get closer to kickoff. And look, it's either going to be Marcel Reed or Connor Wegman starting. I would expect both quarterbacks to play in some capacity, though I do anticipate Marcel Reed being the starter playing majority of this game. He only threw 2 passes, completed both of them for 70 yards against LSU last week in what was a 38-23 win at Kyle Field for the Aggies. But what he does well is run on the ground. 9 rushes for 62 yards, 3 touchdowns. He's really solid in the run game, and he's going to be a lot of trouble to stop with his legs, because if South Carolina is not able to create pressure in the backfield and they're not, clogging up holes, it makes it easier for Reed to move around as he wants to. And that's the same case for A&M as just a whole in the run game, because I think that's probably where they're best at. So I would say in bringing in what Marcel Reed brings to this matchup, he's quick, he's dynamic, he can throw the ball occasionally. We saw him throw a nice long pass in the LSU game. But I do think where he's at his best is definitely on the ground, and that's something that South Carolina is definitely going to have to be ready for, is stopping him on the ground.
Yeah, definitely. Then on the other side, Lenore Sellers, he kind of has that dual threat ability. Like I think we talked about in week 8, towards the beginning of the season, we saw him more rushing, but recently we've seen him be able to be both a rushing and passing quarterback. How do you think that compares to previous quarterbacks that A&M's faced this season?
I think it is definitely a different look, right? And it's kind of the same thing for both teams where, this week in preparation, and whether you're going up against Reed with A&M's defense and Sellers giving South Carolina as many looks as possible, same deal with Robbie Ashford, they both are going to be able to give you what you want. And I think with Sellers, he creates a lot of challenges for opponents, right? I don't think the results have fully been there the way you would want them to be. I mean, 5 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, not exactly perfect, but at the same time, he's getting better as the season has gone along. He completed 74% of his passes against Alabama, completed 66% against Oklahoma, didn't turn the ball over once. He did take 5 sacks, but overall, I think he played very well in that OU game. So, in terms of how A&M has to prepare for him, look, A&M has been great on both sides of the ball this year. They are a well-rounded team. That's why they're currently in first in the SEC right now. But I do think Sellers, when he gets going, he is a nightmare kind of to stop, because if he's hitting his targets consistently, that's the problem for A&M. And if when he wants to, whether it's a triple option or just scrambling out of the pocket, he can make things happen with his feet. So I think it is going to be an interesting matchup. I feel like if South Carolina is playing from behind in this game, you might see Stellars have to be a little bit more heroic in this game. That might lead to some turnovers, which you definitely don't want. But if Sellers is able to play his best brand of football, I can only imagine how good he can be. And also, you're getting some weapons back on offense. You're getting Jared Brown back this week. That's going to be big. You're also going to have, obviously, Rocket Sanders is healthy and good to go for the last few weeks now. And everyone else should be good to go on offense. So I think you have the weapons out there to give Sellers the best opportunity to be successful. We just got to go see him out there do it. You know what I mean?
Definitely. Moving over to that South Carolina defense that we've been talking about really all season long. How do you think that really top tier total defense is going to be able to handle a really strong offensive line from A&M?
No, you're definitely right. A&M's got a great offensive line, and they've been able to protect whoever's at quarterback, whether it's Reed, Wegman, whoever. A&M has been able to protect up front. I think that creates a challenge per se for South Carolina because South Carolina's defensive line, as we know, and just the defense in general, has been phenomenal this year. I mean, they had the 9 sacks against Oklahoma 2 weeks ago, and that was against Oklahoma's really poor offensive line. Now, with this week, the challenge is going to be greater because this is kind of like think about your LSU matchup where you hear so much about how LSU, Joe Moore award winners, really great offensive line. South Carolina was able to generate enough pressure in the backfield. It's just they, couldn't consistently get the big sacks that maybe they needed. They got a few, but it wasn't like 9 or anything. You know what I mean? So I think in this game, that's going to be one of the big battles is can South Carolina, A, get in the backfield and create pressure, and number 2, finish off plays and make whoever's at quarterback, whether it's Reed, Wegman, make their life as difficult as possible and force them to throw it more. I think that's kind of where you can win this game is in the secondary because A&M doesn't have the best passing offense in the world, but they are a really good running football team. So if A&M does what it wants running the football, you might be looking at a loss here. But if they're not, if you hold them to maybe under like 100 yards rushing, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but it feels like if that's the case, you're going to have to throw the ball more to win this game then. And I like South Carolina's chances in that matchup to really defend well in the air.
Mm-hmm. As you talked about with the sacks, Nick Eamon-Moore, he's been doing really, really well. What do you think the role of turnovers is going to be in this game? We saw him being a really big playmaker in week 8.
Yeah, against Oklahoma, he had the 2 interceptions. One went for a pick 6, and that was a really great play. Again, he's got a knack for the ball all over the field, and it's not just him. It's everyone on this defense, and that's the thing with South Carolina. When they win the turnover battle, more time, and it just goes for any football team. When you win the turnover battle, you typically are coming out on top, winning games. So I think for South Carolina, that's something they got to definitely do this weekend. It starts on offense with taking care of the football again. Can they have a game where they have no turnovers for the second straight game? I'm not sure because they've had a little bit of a turnover issue this year, as we know. And at the same time, on the defense, I don't know if it's realistic to expect South Carolina to put you up 21-0 already with 2 defensive touchdowns. That is just not going to happen unless I'll eat my words on it next week. But I just don't expect South Carolina to do that again just because it's just a very hard thing to do, scoring defensive touchdowns. Now, I think to answer the question, Karenna, defense in this game and turnovers are going to be massive. If South Carolina gives the football away a few times, you're looking at a really tough path to victory, and we'll get into that more later. But if A&M is the one making mistakes in this game and giving the ball to South Carolina and putting them in good field position because of those turnovers, I expect South Carolina to win the football game. So we'll see what happens, but turnovers are going to be massive in this game. And one mistake, as we all know, really could be what separates a win and a loss for either team.
Mm-hmm, definitely. How do you think moving over to special teams, that's going to impact this game? I think that South Carolina could really leverage their special teams ability to gain an advantage.
No, definitely right. And you go back to 2 years ago in this game at Williams-Brice Stadium, coincidentally at night, when Xavier Legette had his kickoff return touchdown, the first play of the game, and that kind of set the tone for South Carolina to win, coincidentally by 6 points in that game. So his kickoff return touchdown ended up being the difference in the game. Not saying you're going to get that in this game, especially at the start. We haven't seen South Carolina have a huge kickoff return play like that yet. Who knows? Maybe someone steps up and becomes a real hero in this game in that way. But I think we're starting to see a little bit more of the Beamer ball narrative kind of actually work. Like we saw the 2 point play with Maurice Brown pummeling into the end zone against Oklahoma, and that worked really well. And you've also seen the fake field goal that should have probably worked with Kai Kroger throwing to, I think it was Brady Hunt in that OU game. The play was there, the throw just wasn't on the money. So I think that is going to be definitely something. Maybe if South Carolina needs a jolt, maybe you see something like that. And even on like special teams with defense, like we saw Demetrius Knight snuff out a fake punt perfectly and get a turnover on downs. So it's not just about what you're doing on the offensive side of the ball in terms of trickery on special teams and whatnot. But I also see it from the standpoint of if A&M tries to run something crazy, maybe South Carolina is going to be ready for it. Who knows? But also just in a general sense of special teams, maybe this game comes down to a field goal. Can you trust Alex Herrera to make a big field goal in this game? I don't know. I don't feel confident in it because we've seen it twice already this year where the game has been on the line. LSU, Alabama, different scenarios, different points in the game. But in the fourth quarter, he did not come through when the team needed him most. And that is something to keep an eye on, definitely. And then Kai Kroger, I think, has been punting very, very well for the Gamecocks this year. I expect him to continue to really have a kind of slept on season. It feels like he's not getting talked about as much as maybe he should. Maybe some people still don't believe in him, but I think he's been a big difference maker. And in a game like this, where maybe points don't come at a premium, or maybe they do come at a premium, who knows? But if it's a low scoring type of game, field position is going to be a real big difference maker in this type of game.
Definitely. Something that we talk about every week, what we think the morale is going to be like going into this game. The Gamecocks are coming off a win that we talked about, we thought would be closer.
Yeah.
35-9 against Oklahoma. Do you think that serves as a motivator? But also, in all time, A&M is 9-1 with South Carolina.
Yes, A&M's had South Carolina's number ever since this quote unquote rivalry. They have a trophy, but like I don't really feel like this is much of a rivalry from the sense of A&M's dominated it. But it's
Mhm.
also like A&M and South Carolina don't really feel like true rivals, even though they are according to the SEC. But I will say to kind of answer the question, like A&M's dominated this rivalry, like obviously ever since 2014, that first game, Kenny Hill and all that at South Carolina, crazy. And obviously, South Carolina's had a lot of issues going up against A&M, but I do feel like the circumstances are different, right? For A&M, they're in the sole possession of first place in the SEC right now, undefeated in conference play. This is kind of unfamiliar territory for them because it's like Alabama's not at the top, Georgia's not at the top, Texas isn't at the top, neither is Tennessee. It's the A&M Aggies, so that is new territory for them. For South Carolina, they're 4-3 right now. November typically is their month where they shine the brightest, not Cocktober, surprisingly enough. And they got a lot to play for. Like if they win this game, the path to bowl eligibility is almost a lock. And you can honestly go beyond that. Maybe you win 7, 8 games at that point, maybe 9. Who knows? So I think the morale for this game, yes, they've had a bye week, but at the same time, I feel like they got a lot of momentum right now. They just came off a huge win 2 weeks ago, and they've had an extra week to prepare for A&M. Now you hope, unlike the Ole Miss game that we talked about a few weeks ago, South Carolina needs to come out ready to go. Not saying they didn't against Ole Miss. I mean, quite frankly, they just did not look like a football team at all in that game. They looked awful. You need to be playing a lot better this time around. And you need to show that, hey, we learned from the first bye week what we did wrong and how we came out flat. This time around, night game, the energy is going to be there, and you got to be ready to go.
Definitely. So, finally, what we love to wrap up with at the end. What do you think the road to victory looks like in this game for either A&M or South Carolina?
Yeah, I don't know how I'm going to lean with this game yet. I'll let you chime in on this too, Karenna, in a second. But I feel like South Carolina has the edge in this game because it's at home. Here's my thing I've been talking about all week, and I mentioned it before. A&M's never really been in this type of spot, to my knowledge, where in the SEC, they're the top dog right now. How do they handle that? And they're also coming off a really big, fiery home win over an LSU team. that you beat with a second half comeback. How do you respond? Is it going to be a trap game for them? I don't know. I think there's a lot of questions about, okay, if South Carolina is able to do this against A&M, like they're able to stop the run, how does that impact what A&M does as a passing game? We don't know for sure what the deal is with A&M with passing. We don't know how they're going to use their quarterbacks. I assume they're going to use both. So I think for South Carolina, you just got to be playing really good defense in this game. I'm not saying you need 2 touchdowns or anything on defense, but you got to be playing sound football, making tackles, not letting A&M run how they want to, because you know they're going to try and come out running the football. And then on offense for Carolina, got to figure it out. I will give them a pass for the way they played against Oklahoma, because you didn't need to do much in that game. You could have just ran the ball the rest of the game and you would have been fine. But there were times in that game where the offense didn't look great, but I feel like they were kind of holding back their best plays a little bit. Maybe. I could be wrong on that, but that's kind of just what I feel like happened in that game. So this game, you got to come out explosive, got to score first, I think. And so I'm not going to give a score prediction, but if I am leaning one way, I do feel like South Carolina can come out here and kind of shock everyone. They seem to get that big win over a ranked team every single year in the Shane Beamer era, or just pull off a win that no one expects. And so I think this is a game that's probably going to be the case. South Carolina needs a win over a top 25 team at home. They need to be able to finish. They didn't finish against LSU. They didn't finish against Alabama. Third time's the charm. Maybe they finish this time around. What about you? What do you kind of feel like? You can go a prediction if you want to be honest. But like, how would you honestly see this game going? What are your keys if you had some?
Well, I think that it's kind of difficult to say because there's a lot of question marks, especially on the A&M side. But I agree that offense definitely needs to be on point, and the defense needs to be perfect to stop that offensive line, because honestly, they look stronger than
they look good.
The last few teams that we've played. So I think that they definitely need to be on point. I think those turnovers, like we said earlier, are definitely going to be a big, big key. But I think that offense needs to be eating up the clock a little bit. I think if South Carolina wants to win, this is not going to be a high-scoring game because their defense is really where they're shining.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And I think eating the clock up, you try to do that, but at the same time, you also want to be in an offensive rhythm. So if that requires you to move the ball quickly and stuff, okay, do it. But we know with this team, they kind of do eat up the clock anyway. So, I mean, they've had 8-minute touchdown drives for 4. Go back to Alabama, that was the case. So I do feel like kind of if you have a lead, you can kind of play how you want to. But if you're behind, you're going to have to play a little quicker and try to score more often. So it's going to be interesting. But I think we're both on the kind of like the same page, right? That South Carolina's probably got a shot to win this game for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. We'll have to see.
I think they definitely have more advantages going into this game, especially with it being at home, especially with it being a night game. And they have everybody pretty healthy this week. So I think that those are all things that are going to work really well for them.
Yeah, most definitely. Again, I think they really are healthy coming into this game. Again, Jared Brown should be back for this game. DeAndre Jules, probably not. And other than that, I think they're in good shape. Now it's just about going out there and putting it together, and we'll see what happens on Saturday night.
Yeah, it'll be exciting. All right, y'all, thanks for joining us this week. South Carolina is playing Texas A&M at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time on ABC. We'll have coverage all weekend. And, Jack, you're going to be keeping us updated all weekend.
That's right, Karenna. I will be there at Williams-Brice Stadium Saturday. It's going to be great atmosphere, hopefully, great time. Like the picture here behind us on screen, I think this is actually from that A&M game 2 years ago. So you know it's going to be a great time, and we're looking forward to it. Going to have all stories, coverage throughout the day on Saturday, then on Sunday too. So a lot of fun. So be sure to stay locked into GamecockCentral.com for all of that.
Yep. For Gamecock Central, I'm Karenna Porter.
I'm Jack Veltri.
All right, y'all enjoy college football week 10.